Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our EB-5 webinar. My name is Peter Helland, one of the moderators for today's discussion, and we are excited to welcome you. We are here, as previously mentioned, to discuss EB-5, and we have some very special guests with us today. First and foremost is our special guest, Karen Lee Pollock, who is the managing partner of Pollock LLC and is consistently recognized as one of the best immigration attorneys in America. She has a wealth of knowledge regarding immigration and EB-5, and she is an immigrant herself. So she has a very eye-opening point of view on how the program works. We are also joined by FPP's Manuel Ortiz and Sonia Clark. Sonia is our regional director for South Africa, and Manuel is our VP for Business Development. So we are very excited to have you today, and I will let them get into it.
Hey, thank you, Peter. It's great to be here and just talk about EB-5, and it's just a great time to be in EB-5. And for those of you that are new to it, EB-5 is a program that was started by U.S. Congress in 1990. And the intent behind EB-5 was to create jobs in the U.S. And one of the really interesting things that happened was that while it was used, it really didn't become popular until you get to about 2008, 2009, and you start going through the financial crisis, which was a very tough time. People weren't hiring, projects weren't getting off the ground. I was finishing up my MBA, trying to get into the job market, and you had like 400 people applying for the same job. It was a very hectic time, if you remember back to then, which is kind of crazy to think that it's been, maybe about 14, 15 years since that was happening. But it was a very troubling time for the financial markets, and developers were looking for ways to also get their projects off the ground. The U.S. was looking for job creation during that time. And so EB-5 became very popular then. And you started to see an increase in the use of the EB-5 program then. So it had been around for about 18 years, but it wasn't until that point that it started getting very popular. And it's only increased since then. And I think it's important just to mention that, the main point of EB-5 from the investor standpoint is going to be that the applicant, spouse, unmarried children under the age of 21 are able to obtain permanent U.S. residency. And that's the benefit to the investor. On the project side, the developer looks at this as an alternative financing tool, especially when the capital markets are experiencing just a fluctuation in interest rates, much like we see right now. And obviously also from the investor standpoint, you're going to see different things that are going to impact them in their home country, whether it's shifts in government policies, security, or just something as very simple as wanting their child to study in the US, right? So those sorts of things are different types of motivations from the investor standpoint. I started in EB-5 back in 2013 and have been through multiple phases of the program. I think one of the cool things that we're seeing right now is that the program has gotten better. If you look back at 2019 and you think about processing times and you look at an I-526, I think back then you were seeing approval sometimes in over 2 years it would take. Right now with the new EB-5 program, what they call post-RIA, you're starting to see some applications approved in 8 months, 9 months, which is a record time for that. And so we're just very excited about what we're seeing in EB-5. Demand is getting a lot better as well because of these increased processing times. And we're just very excited about that. And Karen, I've worked with you for many years, have traveled the world with you, talking to EB-5 investors and just educating people about what EB-5 is. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you've seen, because I think we've both seen the changes of EB-5 and where it is right now, which I think it's in a much better place than it has been historically as well.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon to those of you overseas. My name's Karen Lee Pollock. I'm the managing attorney of Pollock Immigration. We specialize in business, family, and investor immigration. So now is a great time for EB-5, the Reform Integrity Act. We're very happy with that. It has definitely, as Manuel has alluded to, shortened processing times, because of COVID, times became especially backlogged. It was taking 3, 4, 5 years for EB-5s to be approved. Now, as Manuel says, 8 to 9 months to a year, we've seen processing times. The longest that we've seen so far is 2 years. So that is a very welcome change. Also, a welcome change is clarification that when you file the 829, which is the second stage of the EB-5, I'll go through that, you can get your money back subject to the terms of the contract upon filing the 829, not only, whereas before you had to have your 829 approved, or it was at least a gray area when you could get your money back. So now, subject to the terms of the contract or the loan, you can get your money back upon filing of the 829. Another great thing is that you can now simultaneously, if you are in the United States on a visitor's visa or some other visa, you can file an adjustment of status at the same time as your 526 immigration petition. So in theory or in practice, investors can file the 526 and then shortly be in America and wait for the green card by filing the adjustment of status. They will get work authorization within 6 months of filing and a travel permit to be able to travel outside the US within 9 months of filing. So those are great changes. As Manuel said, I'm an immigrant myself, so I bring a unique perspective to immigration law. Not only am I a lawyer and I hopefully know the law, but I know what a traumatic process it is and how nerve-wracking it is going through immigration, as I've been through it myself. So I bring a different set of eyes to the problem when I see potential clients or clients. I know the timing is everything, and often with exchange rates, doing immigration as expeditiously as possible is always key. So that's where I bring the immigration perspective from an immigrant from. I also know the law. I've been practicing for over 2 decades. I won't tell you how long. I don't want to date myself, but I've been practicing for over two decades. So I know the law. Like Manuel, we've seen many changes. And I think the most recent changes are good ones. Don't you think, Manuel? We're happy with that. So I think that EB-5 is a good time now to invest with these changes and with their shortened processing times. I wanted to briefly, as time allows us, go through just a brief overview of the process. For those of you that are interested in the EB-5, I'm going to share my screen with you. Thank you. Okay, so if we look, this is the cycle of an EB-5 from starting out with the project to eventually getting citizenship. Right at the beginning, you really want to do your due diligence and get information on the project that you're going to invest in, information on the regional center. You want to make sure that you go with a regional center that has a proven track record. When I started out, there were very few regional centers. I could count the number on one hand. Now, every day, I'm getting brochures from the next best fancy regional center. And as the saying goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is true. So be very wary. When you're doing your due diligence, when you look for proven track records, you want to ask the regional center not only how many 526 petitions they've done, but also how many 829 approvals they have. Because when you get to this stage, the 829, which is filing the second stage of the EB-5 petition, you are at the mercy of the regional center to provide you with documents. So it's very important that you go with a regional center where the regional center and or the person that you're dealing with has many years of immigration experience. The other arm before you file anything is the regional center and the attorney representing you will get information from the investor. The biggest reason for denial of EB-5 immigration petitions is that the investor has not been able to show the source and the path of the funds. It is very important that you are able to prove to United States Citizenship and Immigration Service how you earned the money and to have a paper trail all the way to the regional center of wiring the money to them. So that is key paperwork in order to file a successful EB-5 petition. Once your attorney has gathered all the information on the project from the regional center, which is a huge, huge filing, it's thousands of pages long. I would say on an average, our applications are about 2,000 pages. So, and the bulk of that information comes from the regional center. Once we've gathered all the information on the project and the paperwork from the regional center and from the investor, we file what's called an I-526E immigrant petition for the investor. We will file that if they are outside the United States, we will file that as a standalone petition. If they are inside the United States on another type of visa, we are now able to file an adjustment of status, provided the priority date is current. For the rest of the world, the priority date is current except for India and China, I believe, right now. So we can file the 485 and the 526 petition simultaneously. We also apply for work authorization and a travel permit. While you are waiting for the travel permit, you cannot travel outside the United States. So that's very important to know. The work authorization permit takes about 6 months to obtain, and the travel permit is currently taking 8 to 9 months to obtain. Right now, we're seeing processing times anywhere from 8 months to 2 years for the 526 to be approved. Once it's approved, if the immigrant and their family are outside the United States, they will consular process, meaning the next application is filed with the National Visa Center, and they will go for an interview at the consulate in their home country. If they are in the United States and they've already filed the adjustment of status application, they will wait for that to be approved in the United States, and they will then be given either an immigrant visa to come into the United States, and approximately 30 days after they enter the United States, they will be mailed a green card, or if they are already in the United States, they will just be mailed the green card. 2 years from the date on the green card, we file what's called an I-829 petition to remove conditions to obtain their unconditional green card. At that point, we have to show that the project has been created and that it has created 10 full-time jobs per investor. The advantage with investing with the regional center is indirect jobs can be included. Those include construction jobs and businesses that have been created incidental to the project. So, and then 5 years from the date that the immigrant got permanent residency, they can apply for US citizenship. So that is a broad overview of the process, given the time limits. It is a very complicated, detailed process. A lot of paperwork, as I said, so due diligence on the lawyers that you use, the regional center that you invest with are key, and it's paramount that you are able to provide documents to show your source of funds and the path of funds to the regional center for the investment.
Karen, can I mention one thing that you discussed on your presentation, because I think it's really important, is that as investors are looking online as well, because you get presentations about, hey, this is the latest greatest project, and like those sorts of things. But I think investors also, as they're looking online and they're conducting their due diligence, there's a lot of like bad information that's actually out there. And what you mentioned that I think is really impactful as well, I just wanted to focus on a little bit, is that working with people that have track records, obviously we'd love for them to work with us if they feel comfortable as well. But the reality of it is that when you're dealing with something that is a family decision that could impact your family for generations. We moved to the US when I was 3 years old, and we went through that whole process. And so whenever you're dealing with something like that that impacts your family for generations, it's very important to just not do this as a, hey, I'm just going to go with the first person that I talked to, or just because this person told me whatever. You've really got to conduct your due diligence, both on the attorney and also the regional center that the investors are working with.
Absolutely, absolutely. So as I was saying, particularly on the 829 stage, which is the petition to remove condition, I've had clients who've come to me. I didn't file their 526 petition, and they've now come to me to file the 829 petition, and either the regional centre has been sued. We all know of a very big one that was considered reputable for many years. They've been sued, they've been shut down, there's lawsuits. We can't get the documents that are required for the 829, and it's not the investor that has the documents, it's the regional centre that has to prove that the project's been created, that the jobs have been created. There is no way for the investor to have those records. And so in those cases, even if the 526 was approved, there's a big chance that the 829 is going to be denied because we don't have proper documents. That is an extreme case. In other cases, even if the regional centre is acting in good faith, they just may not have the track record or the experience to know what kind of paperwork is required on the 829 stage. So it's very important that you go with the regional centre, where the regional centre and or the person you're working with from the regional centre has that kind of experience.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then I think also, as they're conducting their due diligence on the regional center, I think it's also really important, because EB-5 does change, and you see all different types of projects that are out there, from film studios to biotech and all sorts of other things. But I think, our position has always been to stick with what we know. And I think that builds your track record as well. I think sometimes when you get a little too exotic and too creative, things can kind of shift a little bit, or whenever you're trying to do too many EB-5 projects at once, from an execution standpoint, that can also be a little bit of a red flag. Not to mention that on the service side, as well, as once you invest, then what reports are you going to get from the regional center as an investor? How in touch are they going to be with you? Or there's a situation where you invest and then it's just, like you said, a hassle to get information from there because they're not in contact with you. So there's a lot of things, from the reputation, track record, the project specifically. How is this project structured? We have 100% approval track record in investors obtaining a permanent green card. But, we do really ask investors to study the fundamentals of each individual project, because you're only as good as your last project as well, or your current project. And so I think those things are really important too.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I also tell clients or prospective clients, they need to understand the project, at least at a high level, or have a business advisor who advises them on the project. When the project becomes too complicated with too many parties, or things like oil and gas wells, for example, is very highly complicated. I'm not saying that it isn't a good EB-5 investment, but you really have to understand it. I personally don't understand oil and gas wells and mineral rights and interests, so I don't do those projects just because I don't understand them. But and that's not to say they aren't good projects, but you really need to have it, at least at a basic level. The investor does have a duty to understand the project that they're investing in.
100%. I'd like to transition to Sonia as well, but one thing that I would like to mention before we do that too is that as investors, when they're considering the EB-5 program, some of the information that is out there also is really good, but I think it's also very important to consider EB-5 as two separate processes, basically moving in parallel, right? So on one side, you have your investment process that's moving. You sign a subscription agreement to subscribe to an investment, but that investment has its own sets of terms, right? So whether it's a 4-year loan to a developer, there's some optional extension options or like those sorts of things. That's your contract on the investment side. That timeline may be different from your immigration timeline. So they might start at about the same point. They're moving down the line, but you may finish your immigration process first. You may be entitled to get your money back quicker, but at the same time, that investment is still ongoing, and that contract, those terms are also something that you subscribe to that we all have to abide by, right? So I think it's important to think of it in that regard. I think the attractive thing for the investors now as well has been that, you know, the processing times, like we mentioned, are getting quicker. I think now you have things like adjustment of status, which are really good, and you can talk a little bit more about that. But you know, I think it's just very important. Just think about it from two processes moving in parallel, but they're independent of each other.
I agree. And we're thankful now that we can file, if you are in the United States on a non-immigrant visa, we can file the adjustment of status, which will allow you to continue to wait in the United States for your green card. So we're very happy about that.
Yeah, and then Sonia, some of the things maybe as well that as you're talking to investors, you're located in Johannesburg, and just some of the motivations. I know there's, you know, quite a bit of benefits for the EB-5 program for students, but also for families. You know, what are some of the motivating factors that you're seeing with investors there as you're talking to them?
Thanks, Manuel, and thank you, Karen Lee, for being on the webinar with us today. It's really a pleasure. And yes, so in terms of reasons for investors wanting to either get a green card or citizenship to the US through EB-5, one of the biggest reasons is the volatility of the rand. You know, depending on what's happening and the stability of the country, the currency can lose value very, very quickly. Whereas if you've got your money invested in the USA in an EB-5 project, at least you know that at the end of the day, you get your funds returned, or the ability to have your funds returned. You know that your funds are locked away safely. Secondly, I would think it's more families of school-going children where everybody's worried about, you know, the level of education. Yes, we've got very good private schools here, but, you know, going to university, let's say you want to be a doctor and you want to now practice in the United States, it's going to be difficult. You've got to take all these exams. So a lot of families want their children in the United States education system. And it's easy to do that before you actually even go to the US. You know, you can do that online to get your kids integrated. And then once you arrive, you know, it's important to actually deal with companies, or which we have a service provider that can assist you to look at schools in whatever region that you want to, or state that you want to settle into. You know, there's also tuition savings. Manuel, you were saying how much per annum as a permanent resident versus an international student can you save per year?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the university, whether you're talking about public or private. But I think at some of the extreme levels, you're talking about, you know, some schools costing $60,000 to $80,000 per year, and then on the other hand, you're looking at some state schools that, if you're a resident of the state, you're looking at, you know, $7,000 to $10,000. So that's just for one child. If you're talking about multiple children, not to mention living expenses, and a whole bunch of books and everything else, that it gets pretty expensive.
Yeah. And also a lot of families that have their children on a student visa are looking at doing EB-5, because once has finished university, there's no guarantee that they're going to get a job. At least through EB-5 and having permanent residency, you know, at least you know that they don't have to leave the US and then start a process, you know, for them to get back there. I mean, Karen knows that very, you know, you've got eligibility through EB-5 to get your citizenship, which is great. You know, after that 5-year period that Karen mentioned, You can work and stay anywhere under an EB-5 visa. You know, if you want to open up your business, you can open up a business anywhere. A lot of the EB-5 applicants own their own businesses. And I think that's the third most important, you know, just the market that's accessible. You know, you've got a much larger population. A lot of people are actually opening up branches of their business there, or, you know, opening up a brand new business. They decide they want to go to Florida. Okay, what am I going to do? I've got a lot of money. And, you know, through various partners, we've introductions as well. And Karen can do the legal side in terms of what people want to do, you know, to get assistance that way. And then, as I mentioned, you know, like Karen said, you got the ability to travel in and out of the US through a travel document. And then you also have the ability to qualify for financial aid and scholarships, which is a huge benefit, I think, in terms of anybody in business wanting to relocate to the United States. So I think, yeah, those are some of the benefits of the top 3 to 4 points, I think, that we're finding in the market here, Manuel.
No, thank you so much for that. And I think that, Karen, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about, you know, whenever you're on an H-1B, or maybe even like a student visa, you're doing the transition or you're already in the workplace, just, you know, some of those benefits of EB-5 to those particular investors.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, once you study in the US, afterwards, you generally, if you're doing a bachelor's or higher degree, get something called OPT, which is optional practical training, that will allow you to work in the United States for 1 to 3 years, depending on your degree that you studied. It's a STEM degree, you'll get 3 years to work in the US. If you don't get a job offer after those 3 years, or you don't get a job offer even during your OPT, you have to leave the country. So it's very uncertain if you've studied in the US and now you've got your OPT and it doesn't work out, if you leave your employer and can't find another one, or what the common trajectory is. People do, they study, and then they get what's called an H-1B visa, which is a professional visa for people with degrees or the equivalent. The H-1B is valid for 3 years and then can be renewed for 3 years. Unfortunately, it's a lottery system, so you've got to be picked from a hat. There are always more applications than visas available. So if you aren't selected in that lottery, you've got to leave the country because your student status is now up. Also, the H-1B is only valid for 3 years and can be renewed for 3 years. At the end of that, unless you've got an employer that has sponsored you for a green card, you will have to leave the country. So it's very uncertain and very out of your control. Whereas with the EB-5 investment, it is in your control, provided that you know, satisfy the criteria for approval. You don't need to worry that you're at the mercy of somebody else sponsoring you for an immigrant visa or to give you a job offer in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely right. I just want to touch on something that Manny mentioned previously, just to go back to the project side real quick. Manny, would you like to talk about our newest project?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, one of the things for investors to consider, because like I said, there are so many projects that are out there, but I think one of the clearest angles is real estate, because obviously you have a construction period. Investors typically have benefited from construction development type projects that the construction lasts over 2 years, because you can take credit from the construction job. So I think that's a big benefit for it as well. But, you know, these developments really have a benefit in terms of job creation as well. And then I think there for investors, it's important for them to look at, why are you actually building this? Why does this even make sense? And so when you look at these types of projects, and we looked at, you know, I want to say about 150 projects, that we were trying to find a rural project that we felt was solid from the immigration standpoint, but also from an investment standpoint. Because for you to have a win in EB-5 as an investor, it not only has to be a good investment, but it also has to be solid from an immigration standpoint. And so we felt very comfortable with KAIA by Outdoor Citizen, which is the project that I'm talking about, because we also felt that there was a good business case for this project. I think that if you look at what happened during the pandemic and people were trapped indoors, and I lived in at that time in downtown Dallas, and there really wasn't much that you could do. Nobody was really going outside, and it was tough. But people were just watching Netflix movies, getting takeout, and those things. So it was a very different time. But I think what that psychologically caused, just in the U.S. and I think in other countries as well, was the desire to connect with nature. And then one of the things that you started noticing during that time, if you remember as well, was that people started renting cabins, going out in the country just to be outdoors and do those sorts of things. Glamping became a really big thing. And so that's kind of continued as well now. And so the project that we have is KAIA by Outdoor Citizen. It's an ultra luxury resort. It has 40 individual casitas that are ultra luxury. And I think that is something that you don't get in glamping, because what you find is that when people go to glamping, they're still in a tent. And so here you don't have the equivalent of a Four Seasons at these great locations. And one of the things that we really liked about this project was that it's located in the city of Kanab in the state of Utah. It's a 3-hour drive from Las Vegas. And we really liked it because of the location. It's close to the northern rim of the Grand Canyon, Zion National Park. Lake Powell is also by there. And so it's a place that receives over 5 million tourists per year. I don't think one of the things that people don't really realize about the state of Utah is that it's a $15 billion tourism economy for the state. And so that is one of the places where people are now going there. You can ski, you can go do all of these different things. And that's a place that is really growing. There's a bunch of demand there. And I think that there are some competitive hotels in the area. Not many, especially of this class, but there is another one that is there, and they're performing extremely well. And I think whenever you go into like Google or TripAdvisor, one of those things, and you see those types of reviews, and that hotel's been there for a while, we feel very confident that there's a test case there. But the other thing that's really cool is that in these locations, you can't just build anywhere because a lot of it is protected land. So sometimes you hear investors that sort of get enamorized with different locations. So to say, hey, back in the old days when you used to be able to do this, you think of investors that, hey, I want a project in downtown LA or in Brickell or in Manhattan, like, because I just want to be there. It's a great location. The project's going to work. And well, unfortunately, you had projects that failed in those locations. And I think right now, too, the same thing stands, right? If you're comparing rural project to rural project, if you have projects in other places that might sound a little bit more glamorous and there's more there, the other side of that is that there's also more competition there. The financial structure might be different. Here, there's a very limited market that is there. You can't really build much, and you've already have a test case of this actually working in a place that there's a lot of tourism that is actually already going there. For this project, again, we're just really happy about it because the financial structure of it is we find conservative. If you look at the capital stack of any project, right? EB-5, one of the attractive things is that it can be either a senior loan, a mezzanine loan, or equity. And so when you think about that as an investor, the most conservative position that you can be in is in a senior loan. Why? Because you have first lien on the property. And as any other bank, because you're acting like a bank here, you could take over the asset, the land, and sell that in the event that something goes dramatically wrong and you need to recuperate investor capital that way. So the senior loan is going to be typically the most conservative. The other thing to consider whenever you're looking at and comparing senior loans versus mezzanine loans, and it's not to say that a mezzanine loan EB-5 project is bad, because there are good ones that are out there. But one of the limiting factors of a mezzanine loan is that you're basically subordinated to the senior loan to the bank, and that's who's calling the shots. And it has a trickle down effect in many different ways. Sometimes if you're the senior lender, you have what is called a debt service coverage ratio, which means that you need to have a certain percentage of income to be able to pay your debt. And there's a ratio there, and typically the ratio is going to be 1.25. If you fall below that 1.25 coverage ratio, sometimes a senior bank can basically just say, hey, we're the priority here, and we have to receive our interest payment before anybody else, which then affects the mezzanine loan in terms of rights. Typically, the mezzanine rights are going to be probably zero or very limited as well. And so this project, we feel that the conservative nature of it is structured as a senior loan. Investors are actually going to be positioned in a conservative position, but then also the value creation for the project is something that is very quick as well. And obviously you can contact us directly and we can tell you a little bit more about that. But in a nutshell, those are the things to consider when you're looking at EB-5 projects and what we have here with KAIA.
Yeah, those are great points made. And as many said, I would encourage everyone with any questions to reach out to Karen or Sonia or Manuel to learn more, especially in regards to their specific fields. And I think we're just going to wrap it up there. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you, Karen and Manny and Sonia, and for all of our participants in the webinar. And yeah, again, please reach out to them with any questions. Visit our website, firstpathway.com. Good luck on your immigration journey.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you,
having
everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.